Welcome to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel Retired Steve Simon, U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation writer and historian.
The United States Air Force Academy is an amazing place, steeped in long blue line history and brimming over with stories. And I'm here to tell them. This is the Heritage Minute. Today I'm joined by Colonel Retired John Kelly, USAFA class of 65. Among other things, we will discuss his role in the establishment of the Sabre Society. Sir, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Nice to connect with you.
So your journey began as a student at the Air Force Academy. What prompted that decision?
I grew up in a lower middle-class family in the Bronx, New York. Didn't have much money, always a worry how I was going to go to college. West Point seemed attractive. My aunt got me an interview with the congressman. He said he'd already promised West Point to somebody, but there was this new school called Air Force Academy. It's like West Point of the Air. He said, "You interested?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So he said, "You got it." So that was it. Talent really had nothing to do with it at the time.
Oh, West Point's loss was our gain then, huh?
The school I went to, they wouldn't give you a principal's recommendation unless you applied to a Catholic school. So it took a little bit of lifting with the principal to make an exception to give a recommendation for the Air Force Academy. But we got that done. So it's strange how things work. God puts you where you need to be, you know?
Absolutely. So how would you summarize your cadet career?
I finished. You know, I was far from a model cadet or what you would call a cadet leader. But I finished. I did pretty well academically, and then I was basically just one of the guys most of the time.
Okay.
I don't really feel like I did anything distinctive, but I didn't do anything to embarrass my family, so it was all good.
There you go. What I call a DG, did graduate. Right?
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Yeah.
So what did you do upon graduation in your Air Force, your active duty career?
So I majored in engineering sciences. And then I flunked a physical to go to pilot training because I couldn't pass this red lens test. So I said I'd go get a master's degree in electrical engineering. Of course, I know growing up in New York, engineers always got jobs. So I didn't know what the future held. So I went to Africa, got a master's degree. And while I was there, Vietnam cranked up, and I read about all my classmates going off to war, and I talked to the personnel people and the medical people, and they said they dropped the red lens test. So I took the physical again, and I passed the physical, and then one night I'm in the shopping center in San Antonio where we were living, and I ran into Colonel Neely, who used to work in the Commandant shop. I forget his exact job, but he kind of did entertainment things for the Commandant. Mm-hmm. So I told him what was going on. So he says, "Come up to see me tomorrow at Randolph." And I went to see him, and he says, "Okay, I got you a slot in pilot training." So off I went. So it was basically a fortuitous meeting in a shopping center in San Antonio that opened the door for me to get into flying school.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. So once again, connections trump talent.
Right place at the right time.
Yeah. Like I always say, God puts you in the right place, you know?
Yeah.
So then I went off and to flying school, and then flew C-130s, and then went to, where did I go from there? Went to the Air Staff in Plans and Operations. I was there with Larry Farrell and a couple of our other classmates, and then went back to the engineering field and in Hanscom Air Force Base, Electronic Systems Division, and I ran the Saudi AWACS program and did that, and then off to the War College, then to, where did I go? Oh, then went to Headquarters Systems Command for a couple of years, and then got to the point where I had 2 kids ready to go to college, and I said, I didn't think I had the talent to go any higher. I was a colonel then, and retired and got a job in the Boston area as a civilian, and lived in Boston for 20-something years, and then bought a house down on Cape Cod. Here we are.
Nice.
So the older girl, which will lead into the next part, she attended Notre Dame.
Okay.
She went there. She graduated in 1992. Yeah, daughter Ann.
Okay, well, that does get us into the next topic I wanted to talk about. Wanted to focus on the early 1990s when you and I were both on the AOG board of directors. I still remember you coming into one of the board meetings and saying you had an idea for a new donor society. And from previous conversations, that your daughter, in fact, prompted or part of the idea of that. So if you could share that whole story about the Soren Society in Notre Dame.
Sure. So our daughter at Notre Dame, and maybe she was a sophomore around then, and we had a friend, Jack McDonald, who was a retired Air Force guy, our neighbor, and he had 2 kids go to Notre Dame. So he said, you ought to join their Soren Society, the Special Donor Society. So it was, I think, $1,000 to join. So we did that. And they had every spring a Soren Society recognition weekend where you went out there and everything you did, they preceded the day by going to Mass. And then you'd get briefings on academics and athletics, and the university leaders would come in and talk. And you'd have nice evening dinners and then a great big formal reception. And it was the perfect blend of warmth and elegance. And we came away very, very impressed. And I came back to the AOG board meeting, and I was telling Jim Shaw, who was then the development guy in the AOG, and Jim Ohm, who was chairman of the board, about it. And I said, we ought to consider something like this. And they said, sure, it makes a lot of sense. So I linked up then with Dan Reagan, who ran the Soren Society at Notre Dame, and George Duke, who was the East Coast development guy for Notre Dame, and told them we would like their help in getting our society running. And they said, well, why don't you send somebody out to the next recognition weekend so they can experience firsthand what the society does. So Jim Ohm and his wife Jean went out.
Okay.
And Ohm came back. He was sold, and he talked to the board, and he says, let's flesh out the concept. So we did that, and the next step was to put together a presentation to go up to the academy to get their buy-in on the society. So we went up and briefed the concept to Hosmer and showed to him that most other large universities that had any kind of significant endowment, the first step in building an endowment was to get a special donor society so you could start inculcate the concept of giving at a significant level. And we made sure it was unrestricted giving because that was the purest form of giving. Mm-hmm. So we briefed it to Hosmer, and I'll never forget, he said, if not this, what? If not now, when? And everybody on his staff chose to realize it was a done deal, and they didn't voice any objections. And we were off and running.
Cool.
And the 2 people on the Hosmer staff who really made it work was Rich Haney and Nancy Burns, who worked for Rich.
Okay.
And they did all the interactions with the academy to get the society going. And we struck up a memorandum of understanding that all the money would go to the academy for cadet leadership activities. Mm-hmm. So that's what got the academy's approval. And then it was up to us to just sort out the mechanics, if you will, of how we would approach the donors and how we would frame the society in a way to make it meaningful to the donors.
Okay. Now, there was another individual I know that was very instrumental kind of in the early days, someone named Greg Collegian. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about him and his contribution.
Yeah, okay, sure. So Greg was my neighbor, and we had done a few things together in the Boston area. He was older brother of a Air Force pilot who was lost in he went down to sea at Hamilton Air Force Base for undetermined reasons. He was very close to the Air Force. He started the Collegiate Trophy, the Flying Safety Award, the Chief, in honor of his brother. And I was explaining this to Greg. And at that time, Greg ran Salami Design, SELAME Design, which was in Newton, Mass., and they did corporate image type work. And he said, God, this is a wonderful idea. I'd like to help you all I could. So he said, where do you want this money to go? So we said, well, we agreed it's going to go to cadet leadership activities because that's why they have a service academy as opposed to going to a civilian school. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay. And then the name Sabre came out of the fact that the saber in cadet life was the distinctive mark of a cadet, leadership.
Okay, right.
So we had the name Sabre Society, and then Greg went back and he came up with the logo and the artwork for the initial solicitation, and I wrote most of that and got the academy staff and a couple of guys on the AOG board to look at it and say, yeah, this is going to resonate the donors.
Okay.
And then the last poll in the tent was, what are we going to name this thing? So as I was telling you earlier, we're sitting at the bar at the Colonial Inn in Concord when Shaw and I think Haney and Owen came back for a New England chapter meeting, I think it was. And what are we going to name this thing? We're having cocktails. Collegian asked, coming up with this name, distinctive thing is of leadership is the Sabre. Why don't we just name it the Sabre Society? So there was the name. And we had the solicitation. And then the next thing was to get it distributed to a target audience, the lead donors, if you will. Mm-hmm. And Ohm did that, and Mark Anderson, and Dave Rowe, and Fred Olmsted all took the lead in doing that. Fred got a bunch of guys from the class of 64.
Okay.
So the initial group that met shortly thereafter that, and Hosmer retired, Paul Stein comes in. I would say we had maybe 50 people, as best I recall, and I think a third of them were Fred's classmates in the class of 64.
Wow, okay.
So it was the class of 64 that really got this thing rolling.
And I get asked this question every now and then, the spelling of the word saber, S-A-B-R-E instead of S-A-B-E-R, how did that come about?
We just wanted to make it distinctive, and we thought it was a little classier. It would stand out to people a little bit more.
I agree, it does. So looking back after 30 years of Sabre Society, which obviously been wildly successful, what are your thoughts on the success of that?
Obviously, all of us who were involved in the beginning are proud of it because you were doing something for something bigger than yourself. We were very surprised at the growth rate of the society. Mm-hmm. I mean, we got from 50 to 200, it seemed like, in a year or two.
Okay, well, the Sabre Society, obviously, definitely something to be, we're all very, very proud of. So we're just about out of time. I'd like to get your final thoughts. But first, a word of thanks to our listeners and to let everyone know that Heritage Minutes and Heritage Minutes specials are all available at any time at usafa.org/Heritage Hub. Heritage Minutes drop every week on Sundays in audio and video. Heritage Minutes specials like this one drop the first Sunday of every month. You can also find us by searching Heritage Minutes on YouTube and can catch This Day in Air Force Academy history every day on CAFA, Air Force Academy's radio station 97.7 FM, or online at usafa.edu/radio. As we close, please let us know what you're up to nowadays.
I'm kind of on an athletic scholarship. We're in Cape Cod for 6 months and now in New Orleans, California, Palm Springs area for the other 6.
Okay.
And it works out well because the one daughter, the Notre Dame daughter, she lives in L.A. and we have a grandson going to USC, and the other daughter's in the Boston area. So, you're only as happy as your least happy kid, and you're both very happy.
Well, very good. So,
yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you.
I'm Steve Simon. Thanks for listening. Find more episodes at usafa.org/Heritage Hub.
You've been listening to a Heritage Minute special with Lieutenant Colonel retired Steve Simon, USAFA class of 77. The Heritage Minute special is a production of the Long Blue Line Podcast Network and presented by the U.S. Air Force Academy Association and Foundation.